Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. So glad you tuned in today. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're talking about mental health, how you can be happier, more calm, and more control of your destiny. My guest is Dr. Daniel Amen. He is a psychiatrist and a Christian and a 12-time New York Times bestselling author. His new book is called Your Brain is Always Listening. Tame the Hidden Dragons That Control Your Happiness, Habits, and Hangups. Dr. Amen, great to see you. Always a pleasure.
Hi, Lori.
So many people are suffering right now and have been for the last year because of the pandemic. And we've seen mental health issues just go through the roof. What made you decide to write this book in particular right now?
You know, the pandemic started for me March 10th of 2020. I was on a book tour for The End of Mental Illness, which I released last year. And I was supposed to go to New York, and the trip got canceled because they basically closed Manhattan. And I remember that night writing down mental hygiene is just as important as washing your hands. We need to disinfect our thoughts and tame the dragon, or we're going to end up with what has happened, which I call pandemic square, that the COVID-19 pandemic spawned a mental health pandemic where depression has tripled, almost everybody's anxious, addictions have skyrocketed, and our brain is just always listening to the negativity and the stress. And we need a way out. And your brain is always listening. It's my attempt to help people get out of the horrible time we're in.
Well, I just love the idea of being able to control your own thoughts and manage the noise inside your brain. A lot of people are not even aware that's possible if they're miserable. They really don't see that there's any changing that. They want to change their circumstances to change, but we can't change our circumstances so many of the time, but we can change our thoughts. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
You know, there's nowhere in school where we're taught how to manage our minds. And I was 28 years old before I realized I didn't have to believe every stupid thing I thought. And by learning to manage your mind, we found it to be as effective as antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication. And prescriptions have just gone through the roof in the last year. And most people don't know it's probably not the first thing to do. The first thing to do is whenever you feel sad, mad, nervous, or out of control, is write down what you're thinking. And then ask yourself, is that true? To really begin to get a grip on what's going on in your head.
It's really fascinating to sort of delve into our own self-talk. So much of what you talk about in the book are things that we are unaware of. And as you say, writing it down is sort of the first step because it makes us more aware of our thinking. And, you talk about really addressing about 6 different areas in particular that where we attack ourselves. And I was wondering if you could sort of touch on those now. You talk about, first of all, thoughts about your past.
Well, the first part of the book, I talk about the dragons from the past that are still breathing fire on your emotional brain. And I have 13 of these dragons. So the first one's actually my dragon. It's called the abandoned, invisible, or insignificant dragon. I'm one of 7. I'm a middle child. I'm a second son. My family completely not special. And so if I listen to the insignificant dragon, it can make me feel small. It can make me feel unimportant. And, I think I've spent my life as a physician and an author sort of taming that dragon. The next dragon is the inferior or flawed dragon. And this is the one that's driving the epidemic of teenage suicide because of social media and constantly comparing yourself in a negative way to others. And I give very specific steps on each of the dragons. Where do they come from? What triggers them? How they cause you to react, and how to tame them. And taming the inferior flawed dragon is you really have to start understanding people aren't thinking about you. There's a rule I talk about in the book. I love this rule. It's called the 18-40-60 rule that says when you're 18, you worry about what everybody's thinking of you. When you're 40, you don't care what anybody thinks about you. And when you're 60, you realize nobody has been thinking about you at all. People spend their days worrying and thinking about themselves, not you. But getting out of the trap of comparing yourself is just so critical in order for you to feel good. The third dragon is the one just breathing fire all around the world. It's the anxious dragon. And there's simple strategies for you to get your anxiety under control that I talk about in the book, like diaphragmatic breathing, but in a very specific way. Whenever you're feeling anxious or out of control, take a big breath, 3 seconds in, but then double that to breathe out. So 3 seconds in, 6 seconds to breathe out. Do that 10 times. It'll trigger a relaxation response, and a sense of calm will just wash over you. Do that 2-3 times a day. You're not going to be having to take a drink or smoking pot or reaching for a pill. You can learn to manage the anxious dragon.
One thing I thought was so fascinating is how you talk about the way the dragons that cause us to be overweight and to be underachievers. That really surprised me.
Well, it's in a section I call the bad habit dragons. And your brain is always listening to your habits. And I always tell my patients, be very careful what you do, because if you do it enough, your brain's going to make you do it again. So if you always have a drink after dinner, as soon as dinner's done, your brain's going to go, we have to have a drink, whether it's good for you or not. And the worst bad habit dragon of all is the oblivious bad habit dragon, where you're just not thinking about the health of your brain and body. And too often, to just soothe the anxiety and the insomnia caused by the pandemic, people really weren't thinking about, is this good for my brain or bad for it? And they were doing a lot of bad things for their brain. So do you sort of have a sense of the calories you're putting in your body a day? Do you read product labels? Like, are you putting things on your skin that are actually filled with toxins that, whatever goes on your skin goes in your body that may be poisoning you? And so not being oblivious is so important, really making thoughtful decisions, because your best defense against COVID-19 is your immune system, but even more importantly, it's your brain. It's making the right decisions day in and day out to keep you and your family safe.
So you operate a number of Amen clinics and are really known for the brain scanning that you do. Can you talk about how you've seen this physical evidence of some of the things you talk about in your book?
Goodness, we've been scanning people for 30 years. And I've been looking recently at a lot of COVID scans. But what we found is your moment by moment thoughts either make your brain work better or they make your brain worse. That when you focus on what you love about your life, your brain is healthier. When you focus on what you're afraid of, what you're angry about, it actually drops the function in your frontal lobes. So your decisions aren't going to be as good. It drops function in your temporal lobes, so you're more likely to have memory problems and be irritable. And what really surprised us, it drops function in an area of the brain called the cerebellum, in the back bottom part of the brain, that's involved in coordination. So you're not quite as coordinated, your memory's not as good, learning's not as good, and your decisions are not as good. And one of the strategies in the book that I just dearly love is called positivity bias training. It's to get your brain, to nudge your brain to look for what's right rather than what's wrong. It's so easy to talk about what's wrong, but that's not going to help you feel better, and it's not going to help your brain work better.
Well, we're going to take a quick break right now. We'll be right back with Dr. Daniel Amen. His new book is called Your Brain is Always Listening. Stay tuned.
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
Welcome back to Healthy Living. My guest today is Dr. Daniel Amen, author of the brand new book called Your Brain is Always Listening. Tame the Hidden Dragons That Control Your Happiness, Habits, and Hang-Ups. You know, you talked last segment about some of the things that trip us up, and you briefly touched on social media, particularly as it pertains to young people, teenagers. But can you elaborate again about the effect that social media has on all of us, including us adults?
Well, you have to be very careful with social media. And the more time you spend on it, the more depressed you are, the more overweight you are. And we're in a double bind in the sense that we're isolated at home. So we need ways to connect with other people. But if we spend too much time mindlessly on social media, people just end up hating themselves because they do this comparison thing where I'm not as pretty as this person, I'm not as wealthy as that person, my home's not as nice. And when you do that, you begin to really feed the inferior, flawed dragon that just brings you down. So we have to be careful and thoughtful, especially with what we allow children to see. But even with ourselves, it can steal your mind. There's a great Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma. And social media companies purposefully try to keep you there, because the longer you're there, the more it supports their advertisers. And they manipulate our minds with negativity, because the brain is wired to pay attention to negativity first. And so they're driving anxiety and depression so that they can make more advertising dollars. And we should not be okay with this. This is not okay, because it's increasing the incidence of mental health issues around the world.
So I wanted to sort of pounce on a statement that you just made, that the brain pays more attention to negative messages. What do you mean by that?
Well, when we were made or evolved, the brain actually needed to be anxious and afraid in order to protect us from predators and famine and pestilence. And so the people who survived early on and passed on their genes were a bit more anxious. But we don't need that same level of anxiety now. Likely we're not going to have a wild beast want us for lunch. But yet every morning when we wake up, for so many of my patients, they wake up in fear. And so it's like we have to retrain our brain. And the book of Philippians is just perfect with this. Philippians 4:8. Paul is very clear. Think on whatever is true, right, lovely, good, excellent, worthy of praise. Let your mind dwell on these things, because left on its own, it often goes to the dark place. But you can retrain it by what you allow to come in. Your brain is always listening. And so you want to make sure you're protecting the inputs, which is why you need to be really careful with the news, because the news often picks the most horrific things that happen that day and feeds it to you nonstop in a loop. And we have to be very thoughtful and careful, because so many good things happened yesterday, but that's not what is being reported today, again, to drive eyeballs to their outlets.
This is such a great message, something we all need to be aware of. We're going to take another break and be right back with Dr. Daniel Amen. The book is called Your Brain is Always Listening.
Want to be a part of a community that inspires your spiritual growth while winning prizes? The all-new MyCBN app. Connect with the community for prayer and encouragement. Track and set spiritual goals. Enjoy conversation starters with friends and family. And collect points to win prizes. The all-new MyCBN app. A great place to belong. Download the app at cbn.com/mobile. Grow, connect, have fun. The all-new MyCBN app.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
Wednesday at 3 on the CBN News Channel.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
We're back now with Dr. Daniel Amen. The new book is called Your Brain is Always Listening. And Dr. Amen, before the commercial, we talked about some red flags regarding what we look at online or on the television, the news and social media. What are your recommendations regarding those two areas?
So I think spend 15 minutes a day with the news from outlets you trust. I think that's really important, to be informed, but not to be absorbed, and be careful. I always I love the Good News Network. I actually start with that in the morning, because it's just like, what positive thing happened yesterday? And they're inspiring stories. I know CBN, there's a lot of inspiring stories. You're going to feel inspired if you do that. Of course, you need to know what's going on during the pandemic, but not every minute of every day. And please don't expose children to that, because it will drive anxiety and depression for them. There's a whole section in the book on the scheming dragons, and there's newsmonger dragons and social media dragons. There's also holiday dragons, where people think, well, it's the holidays, I don't really need to pay attention to my health, which is a complete lie, because there's no good reason why we celebrate the resurrection of Christ or the birth of the baby Jesus by feeding everybody bad food. I mean, how does that make any sense? Your brain is listening to the messages moment by moment that you're feeding to it.
Wow, that really says a lot. Okay, we're going to take one more quick break and be right back with Dr. Daniel Amen. Stay with us.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
Nigerian Christians
in Iran are routinely arrested.
Happily, Christians continue to suffer.
In times of trial and affliction, you need to know the truth.
One of the fastest growing Christian populations in the world.
Join Wendy Griffith and George Thomas for Christian World News.
Young people are the ones who are open to the gospel.
Powerful stories of suffering and hope that affect all Christians. Saturday night at 6 on the CBN News Channel. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
We're back talking with psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Amen, author of the new book, Your Brain is Always Listening. And Dr. Amen, we know that addiction is just plaguing our country. Before the pandemic even began, we talked about the opioid addiction, and now so many people are turning to drugs and alcohol to make it through this pandemic. Talk about your new program to help tackle some of these addictions.
So I've been treating people struggling with addictions for a very long time, and many of them go to 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm a big fan of those. but they were developed 85 years ago. And so I actually reimagined the 12 steps from a neuroscientist perspective. And for example, step 3 is you got to get your brain right, because if your brain's not healthy, you're not going to be able to control the impulses you have. And I also talk about you have to know your brain type. All addicts aren't the same. We have impulsive addicts, compulsive addicts, sad or anxious addicts. So it's a completely new way to get control of your bad habits and any addictions you might struggle with.
Can you talk about what some of these addictions are? For example, is food or is sugar an addictive substance?
No question. Sugar is, it's got no nutrients in it. It's addictive. And over time, it sort of makes you dumb. So it's very important to know what's healthy for your body and brain and what's not. Plus, I published 3 studies that show as your weight goes up, the function of your brain goes down, which should scare the fat off anyone. And knowing how to manage your mind, that's really how you get to a healthy weight. It's a brain function. And that means you have to start loving and caring for your brain.
And so many of these things that you recommend are things we need to do every single day. You talked about, our thoughts and the book of Philippians and some of these things that we need to remind ourselves of every single morning, because our natural tendency is to go negative, right?
Absolutely is. And you can train your mind. There's something in the book called positivity bias training. I start every day with today is going to be a great day. And whenever I go to bed at night, I go, what went well today? And it's a treasure hunt. Every night, I'm on a treasure hunt to just look for the small moments. I call them micro moments of happiness, because I'm nudging my brain to look for what's right rather than what's wrong.
What is your advice regarding looking at screens? Is that something that we should avoid right before bed?
Yeah, the screens, the blue lights actually turn off melatonin, the hormone that helps you sleep. And so after dark, you either need blue light blockers on all your gadgets, or you need to turn them off and actually get a good book.
Yes, indeed. So unfortunately, we're out of time. Dr. Amen, I'm sure people have so many more questions. Where can they find out more about this book?
For this book, they can find out all about it at yourbrainisAlwaysListening.com. And they can find out about our clinics at Amen like the last word in a prayer, clinics.com.
And we know you have a daily podcast with your beautiful wife, Tana.
We have almost 1,000 podcasts that we have done. Tana and I. You can go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com and learn all about it.
Well, Dr. Amen, thank you so much. Once again, the book is called Your Brain is Always Listening: Tame the Hidden Dragons That Control Your Happiness, Habits, and Hang-Ups. Dr. Amen, thanks again so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Lori.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. We hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye now.